You've probably done this before. You're standing in the grocery store, staring at two bags that look almost identical. One says cocoa powder, the other says cacao powder. One is a few dollars more expensive and has words like raw, organic, or superfood splashed across the front. And suddenly you're wondering, have I been buying the wrong one my whole life? Here's the thing, they both come from the exact same plant. No, really. Cocoa and cacao both start with the seeds of the Theobroma cacao tree, literally translated as food of the gods. And honestly, once you taste real chocolate in its pure form, you understand why. So if they come from the same tree, why do they have different names? And more importantly, does it actually matter for your health? This is where it gets interesting. The difference isn't about the plant, it's about what happens after the beans are harvested. Once cacao pods are picked, the beans inside are fermented and dried. After that, the path splits. If those beans are roasted at higher temperatures, they become what we usually call cocoa. If they're processed at lower temperatures, or sometimes labeled as raw, they're sold as cacao. That's it. Same bean, different processing. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but roasting something can't make that big of a difference. Right. Actually, it can. Let's start with flavor, because this is the part you'll notice immediately. Cocoa powder, the kind most Americans grew up with, has that smooth, rich, classic chocolate taste. It's what makes brownies taste like brownies. It's what gives hot chocolate that cozy, nostalgic flavor. Roasting mellows the bitterness and deepens the overall profile. It's familiar, comforting, easy to love. Cacao powder, on the other hand, tastes sharper, more intense, a little more bitter. Some people describe it as darker chocolate turned up a notch. There can be slightly fruity or earthy undertones that feel less dessert-like and more raw. And that's because, well, it is less processed. If you've ever tried adding cacao powder straight into milk, expecting Swiss Miss vibes, you probably got a surprise. It's stronger, less sweet, more bold, but flavor is only half the story. The real reason cacao gets all the hype is nutrition, because cacao is typically processed at lower temperatures. It tends to retain more naturally occurring compounds called flavonoids. These are plant-based antioxidants that have been studied for their potential role in supporting heart health. Research suggests that cocoa flavanols may help improve blood flow, support healthy blood pressure levels, and even contribute to better endothelial function. That's basically how well your blood vessels relax and expand. And yes, those benefits are linked specifically to cocoa flavanols found in cacao beans. Cacao is also naturally rich in minerals like magnesium and iron, along with fiber. Magnesium in particular plays a role in muscle function, nerve signaling, and blood sugar regulation. So when people call cacao a superfood, they're usually referring to this nutrient density. But here's what most people don't realize. Cocoa powder still contains flavonoids too. Roasting does reduce some of these compounds, but it doesn't wipe them out completely. Unsweetened cocoa powder can still provide beneficial plant compounds, especially if you're choosing minimally processed or non-alkalized versions. And that brings us to something called Dutch processed cocoa. You've probably seen this on labels and never thought twice about it. Dutch processed cocoa is treated with an alkaline solution to reduce acidity and make it smoother and darker in color. It tastes milder and blends beautifully into baked goods. But that alkalizing process can reduce flavonoid levels more significantly than regular natural cocoa. So if your goal is maximizing antioxidant intake, natural cocoa or cacao may offer a slight edge. But let's pause for a second and be honest. Most people aren't eating spoonfuls of pure cacao for cardiovascular optimization. They're making brownies or chocolate protein smoothies or the occasional mug of hot cocoa on a cold night. And this is where context matters. If you buy cacao powder because it's healthier, but then add tons of sugar, flavored syrups, or sweetened creamers to make it palatable, you've kind of canceled out the advantage. On the flip side, if you use unsweetened cocoa powder in moderation as part of an overall balanced diet, it can absolutely fit into a healthy lifestyle. Chocolate itself isn't the villain, it's what we pair it with that often makes a difference. Now, let's talk about baking, because this part actually matters more than people think. Cacao powder tends to be more acidic since it's less processed. Cocoa powder, especially Dutch processed, has lower acidity. That affects how it reacts with ingredients like baking soda and baking powder. Baking is chemistry. If a recipe specifically calls for a natural cocoa powder and you swap in cacao or Dutch processed cocoa without adjusting other ingredients, the texture and rise might change. You might end up with flatter cookies or denser cake or something that just feels off. So if you're following a recipe, stick with what it calls for. If it says natural cocoa powder, use that. If it says Dutch process, don't substitute blindly. And if you're making raw desserts, smoothies, or energy bites, cacao can work beautifully because you're not relying on chemical leavening reactions. And here's another layer. Most people never think about. The word cacao is sometimes used more for marketing than for strict scientific classification. In the United States, there isn't a universally enforced legal distinction between cocoa and cacao labeling in every context. Some brands use cacao to signal that a product is less processed or more premium. Others use cocoa for familiarity. So while processing differences are real, the naming can occasionally blur in the marketplace. That doesn't mean it's a scam. It just means you should read labels carefully instead of relying purely on the front of package buzzwords. So which one should you choose? If you love that classic chocolate taste bake-offen or want something smooth and reliable, cocoa powder is completely fine, especially unsweetened natural cocoa. It's versatile, affordable, and still contains beneficial compounds. If you're interested in maximizing flavonoid intake, enjoy bold flavors, or like adding chocolate to smoothies and yogurt bowls without heating it, cacao powder might appeal to you more. It's closer to the bean in its original form. But here's the bigger picture. Both come from the same plant. Both contain beneficial plant compounds. Neither one is a miracle health food, and neither one is inherently bad. What matters far more is your overall dietary pattern, how much added sugar you consume, how balanced your meals are, and whether chocolate is an occasional treat or a daily excess. Chocolate doesn't have to be a guilty pleasure. It can be part of a balanced diet when used mindfully, and understanding the difference between cacao and cocoa just helps you make a more informed choice instead of being swayed by marketing. So the next time you're in that baking aisle, staring at those two bags, you'll know exactly what you're looking at. Same tree, different processing, slight nutritional differences, distinct flavor profiles, and a choice that really comes down to your goals and taste preferences. If this changed the way you think about chocolate, hit subscribe. I break down health science like this every week. Real research, no hype, just practical information you can actually use in your everyday life.